Hi everyone, I'm Anya Parampil and you're watching Redlines. Stuck home under quarantine, you've probably noticed that one U.S. politician saw his national profile soar as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has emerged as the most vocal opponent of President Donald Trump. He's taken over as the most prominent Democratic adversary of the president, even in the midst of an election year. Perhaps that's why a recent poll found that 56% of Democrats want Governor Cuomo to replace Joe Biden as the party's presidential nominee. The numbers make sense considering Cuomo has been given hours of free advertising on corporate media, particularly by CNN, the very same network which helped propel Trump's campaign to victory in 2016 by streaming all of his campaign events and rolling out the breaking news bumper for every one of his tweets. What's especially interesting about Cuomo's sudden rise, however, is the fact the governor has gained so much of his airtime through interviews with his little brother, Chris Cuomo, who hosts the coveted 8 p.m. news slot on CNN and tested positive for the Rona himself. Andrew has given multiple interviews to Chris, during which he's pressed with challenging questions such as,
Now, you know, I've seen you referred to a little bit recently as the love gov, and I'm wondering if that's bleeding into your demeanor at all, making you a little soft on the president, that you don't want to really criticize him because you need him and now's not a time for fighting. But don't you have to balance that with calling him out if he's doing things that you don't think are great for the people of your state to be hearing and experiencing? Love gov?
I've always been a soft guy. I am the love gov. I'm a cool dude in a loose mood. You know that. I just say, let it go. Just go with the flow, baby. You know, you can't control anything.
You've never
so
said
don't
any
even
of those
try.
things.
Water off a duck's back.
It's the first time you've said
me.
any of those.
Yeah, I think I. Really? Yeah. Wow.
Never said anything.
Look, I've
known you my whole life.
All right.
With all of this adulation that you're getting for doing your job, are you thinking about running for president? Tell the audience.
No.
No, you won't answer?
No. I answered. The answer is no.
No, you're not thinking about it?
Sometimes it's one word. I said no.
Have you thought about it?
No.
Bernie Sanders is out. The word is that this increases the chances with Senator Sanders out that you may get it in the race for president. Is that true?
Is that the word? Well, then it must be true.
That's the word on the street.
Right.
Is that?
Oh, the word
is that
on
a
the
yes?
street?
I'm sorry,
Well,
I didn't hear an answer. Was it responsive? You're not responsive.
I'm just saying, if that's the word, who am I to argue with the word?
Now, there is more political momentum around the idea of you accepting a vice presidential bid from Joe Biden. Is that something that you're considering?
I'm not that guy, Chris. I'm not that politician who says, yeah, I want to, it's all about me and the next step on the ladder.
Even if your
That's what
party's
turns
jumping up
people
and
off.
down with
I'm going to be
signs
true
at a
to
digital
my
convention,
word.
And they call you and say, we need
Yeah,
you,
they can
love
jump
gov.
up and down. Yeah, Love Gov says, no way.
I just want to ask the question. So for right now, it's a no.
I'm not going to be vice president.
Or VP.
Yeah.
VP either. No VP, no P. Are you open to thinking about it?
No.
Might you think about it at some point?
No.
How can you know what you might think about at some point right now?
Because I know what I might think about and what I won't think about. But you're a great interviewer, by the way.
Huckapoo was your signature look back then. You've abandoned it. Why? Governor, it is good to remind people
Yes, sir.
that they are just coming to love you now as much as I have my whole life. And it's because of your commitment to what you do for other people. It's what matters most to me about you.
Yeah.
And I love you very much. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for keeping my spirits up. And thank you for what you're doing for the state.
I almost sympathize with Andrew's energy there because he seems just as annoyed with his brother as I am. But let's be real, the governor loved every minute of that. Here they are again, this time boosting the governor's weird #IStayHomeFor Instagram campaign by pretending to argue over who first posted a photo of their elderly mother.
Important campaign you're pushing for people right now called Stay Home and Who Are You Staying Home For? It's a good idea. It's a good way to connect the personal commitment of what they're doing. My decision is, and as I posted today very early before anybody else responded to the call that you put out, I'm staying home for my mother. because I love her, and at her age, she's uniquely vulnerable to the virus. And that's why making the move out of the house that Christina and I made was 100% our own, and we did it early. Who are you staying home for? Because I'm staying home for my mom.
Yeah, the whole campaign is dedicated to my mother. And I said that first thing this morning when I posted my picture.
I didn't hear you say anything.
Who are you staying at home for? Yeah,
right.
My mother. My mother. My mother. I'm staying home for my mother.
Oh, you're staying at home for your mom, too. Isn't it weird, though, after I just said it?
No, I went first. I had my picture at my press conference saying I'm doing it for my mother.
I suppose all of us are supposed to just sit back and think it's totally cute, charming, and normal that the governor of New York is doing regular interview spots with his little brother on a major news network, while he isn't, obviously, granting interviews to hosts who might be more critical of his record. Just try to find an Andrew Cuomo appearance on Fox, for that matter. Add that to the fact they're both the sons of famed New York Governor Mario Cuomo, and you've got yourself a heaping slice of good old-fashioned American nepotism. What? You thought Chris got that primetime CNN slot based on merit?
The chest gets you. It makes you small. It's really what defines this COVID. And the COVID is banking on you doing nothing, your indolence, as the doctors call it. It wants us passive on our backs. It wants us to do nothing. The answer has to be to do everything. I lie on my side, I lie on my stomach, I'm up, I'm doing my breathing. I know I've got that stuff in my lungs. I'm not gonna lose to this thing that way. No way. No way I'm gonna do that to my wife and my kids and all the people who care about me. I'm not going into the hospital for something that I can avoid it, if I can avoid it. So that's it. All day, all night, Hundo P, 100%.
Hundo P? I guess that's the fancy terminology you learned from a Yale education. Seriously though, while we all want Chris to get well soon, his behavior is just a bit narcissistic. I'm pretty sure the tens of thousands of Americans who have died from coronavirus wanted to continue their lives with their families just as much as he does, and didn't succumb to the illness because they were lacking the drive of a perpetual frat boy. Chris has opted to suffer through coronavirus in the public eye, even sitting down to do his show after spending a sleepless night, apparently, talking with his dead father.
It was like somebody was beating me like a piñata. And I was shivering so much that Sanjay's right, I chipped my tooth. These are not cheap, okay? And they call them the Rigors, like riggers, R-I-G-O-R-S, but Rigors. So the sun comes up, I'm awake. I was up all night. It was I'm telling you, I was hallucinating. My dad was talking to me. I was seeing people from college, people I haven't seen in forever. It was freaky what I lived through last night. And it may happen again tonight. Doctor says it may happen like 5-8 times.
Even CNN's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, appeared disturbed by Chris's Hundo P mentality.
Chris, you mean, look, I just want to say, and I know this is not what the segment's about, first of all, I'm happy to see you. We spoke last night after the show. You had these Rigors. I'm just going to say it's so bad that I think you chipped a tooth. I mean, this was significant for you, Chris. And I'm just going to say as well, you know, we talk a lot about abdication of duty. I don't want to abdicate my duty when I know you're a warrior, but you're allowed to take a day off, you know, and yeah, I mean, you say you feel worse today. I'm glad you don't have the tightness in the chest still, because I was worried about that. But Chris, man, you know, we love you, we think about you, and it's okay to you know, I know you're dreaming about this stuff, you're fully engaged, but it's okay to take a day off.
But Chris Cuomo hasn't taken a break. In fact, he even had time and energy to join his brother Andrew during one of his daily press briefings. It's clear the Cuomos have made a conscious decision to politicize the younger's illness. Listen to how Chris turned his Hundo P monologue into a rant against the president.
That's why I had to come at the government, specifically in the prism of this president, when he says things that play to our weaknesses. It's not his job. It's, you know, to test. That really? He doesn't want the federal government to test? What the hell is his job if it's not to do everything that he can? This has to be desperation on all fronts. Personally, as a function of community, and in terms of our leadership. We have to be desperate to beat this. That is the way we will all get better.
Now, none of this is to say that there aren't plenty of legitimate criticisms to be made of the Trump administration's handling of the COVID-19 outbreak. But isn't it a little uncomfortable that a prime-time CNN anchor is weaponizing his experience with the virus against his brother's primary political opponent on the national stage? Why is that acceptable? If anything, it only supports Trump's narrative that CNN is corrupt. Whether or not Cuomo is somehow drafted to lead the Democratic ticket this November, and I wouldn't put it past the vile party elite to invent a criminal mechanism for doing just that, this whole saga has boosted the Cuomo brand, and we all should find that troubling. Comedian Michelle Collins recently published a love-struck teenage girl journal entry-style piece in fashion magazine Marie Claire, declaring Governor Cuomo to be America's new boyfriend. Quote, "Like a velveteen gravity blanket for my soul, the second I see this man's perfectly weathered face and tousled curls, the moment his Pacino-like accent fills my living room with its mafia-like authority, my blood pressure drops, my breasts seem to perk up on their own, and a tingly feeling of optimism washes over my imprisoned body as I think to myself, I think we're going to be okay," she gushed. Well, guess what? You're not going to be okay, because Governor Andrew Cuomo is nothing more than an establishment corporate political thug who actually helped set the stage for New York's perilous coronavirus outbreak by slashing the budget on everything from Medicaid to hospitals to schools while lowering taxes for his rich donors. Just ask any advocate for the poor and working class in New York what they think about Cuomo, and they'll tell you he's Governor 1%. To find out why Andrew Cuomo is not bae, I spoke earlier with comedian Randy Credico, who challenged Cuomo for the governor's seat in 2014. Randy Credico, political activist, comedian, and former gubernatorial candidate in New York, someone who actually ran against Andrew Cuomo in 2014. Welcome to Red Lines. How are you doing?
Hey, it's great to be on Red Lines. I think it's my debut.
It is. We have been warming up, so I'm very excited that you're finally joining me on Red Lines. I wanted to just start by getting your quick take on the way Governor Cuomo has been elevated to this hero status as a result of the coronavirus outbreak. He's taken on this role as kind of the primary Democratic challenger to President Trump, although he's not, as of yet, the candidate for president on the Democratic Party ticket. What do you think about all of this? There are articles in Marie Claire, for example, declaring he's America's boyfriend.
It's completely startling. But not surprising, because the guy is very clever at this type of thing. He saw something. Everyone thought Richard Jewell was like a guy who did something, and then it turns out he didn't. Well, Cuomo is the Richard Jewell that we thought he was, because
Richard Jewell actually being the most underrated film of 2019, I should also say. Side note.
I know, but people thought that he planted it, and it turned out that he didn't. Cuomo, in many ways, he allowed this to happen in New York State. New York State, with its international fare, it's just the place is a polyglot. Everyone comes in and out of JFK or LaGuardia or Newark. So there was so much humanity internationally coming through here. And he sat on it. He didn't close the schools until March 16th. March 16th, he closed the schools. And so Washington was way ahead of us. And that's why Washington State has it under control. California, under Newsom, has it under control better than we do at this point in time, even though they are an international state as well. So he kind of fell into it, man. He's become the Forrest Gump in all of this, Zelig, if you will, in all of this. How he had... he helped light the fire. Now he's saying, hey, there's a fire over there, and I'm going to help put it out. That's what's happened here with Andrew Cuomo.
You really feel like he's responsible for the scale of the outbreak in New York?
Absolutely. I mean, Trump is responsible too on a national level by not taking it so seriously. But Cuomo waited a lot longer than California. You would think by now California would have more deaths than New York because it broke out on the West Coast quicker than it did here. And in Washington State, it happened before it happened here. But they put it out. Or at least have contained it. He saw what was happening. If he was a genius, he would have said, all right, we better stop. We've got to do something right away, the way this thing is spreading. And he didn't. In fact, he absolutely went against it. If you take a look at people who are now really examining him, and because I go to his Twitter account and take a look at what he was saying way back in late February, early March, it contradicts this image of him being the guy that ran to the rescue immediately, because he didn't. And plus his behavior has been horrible with the homeless. We've got an outbreak with homeless. We have a lot of homeless in the state, and with prisoners. He's done nothing to help, but he never did. And I want to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Definitely.
But he did nothing, and he could have stopped something. Rikers has got the highest in the country. I think maybe Cook County Jail now may be up there with us, but Rikers, I have 700 people have got the at least, and they say 700. Now I've performed at Rikers, I've visited inmates at Rikers, and the place is full with mostly low-level, non-convicted, drug offenders, fare beaters, all of that. So people go in and out, guards go in and out, and he did nothing about it. 700. That's like a week ago, the 700 number, and now it's broken out in state prisons. We're not hearing what the numbers are. I got a feeling that's being suppressed. But that these prisons around the country are hotbeds for the spread of viruses. I mean, you take a look at. My father was in prison. He was in, where the Shawshank Redemption was filmed in Ohio. My father, it was called the Ohio State Reformatory. And my father was there. He was a male nurse on the tuberculosis ward, because tuberculosis is always running rampant inside these prisons. And he didn't do anything about Rikers. They were going to let some people out. Other states have done it. Other countries have done it. Iran's done it. They've let prisoners out, and he hasn't. And he and Bill de Blasio both are lax on this. But someone the other day said, well, Newsom hasn't been so good on this either. And, these Democratic governors are not good on it, to be honest with you. I'll get to Cuomo and the clemencies and all that in a minute. But he was slow he hasn't done anything with the prisoners, and he's not even thinking about it, to be honest with you. He says, what he said? He says, I don't have time for that. It's something like that. I don't have time. There's no time for that. So we'll see what.
Well, there is no time, but not in the way he's saying it. There is no time to address this crisis, especially within prisons. Those prisons are going to end up burdening the entire health system unless they just decide to completely cut those people off from the outside, which would be a dire mistake and situation that would just be so ugly. You mentioned Iran. That country actually released over 80,000 prisoners in response to the outbreak. And that's what's so crazy here, Randy, is that Governor Cuomo is engaging in this kind of theatrical politics, this fight with the president, when there are actual concrete steps he could be taking with his authority as the governor in New York, such as releasing prisoners, and he's not doing it. What do you think about the fact that he's getting all of this airtime in the corporate media, particularly with his own brother, Chris Cuomo, who hosts the 8 p.m. slot prime time on CNN?
It's funny because Chris Cuomo, they tried to get me on the show like 3 times earlier this year or last year, mid last year, 4 or 5 times. And then he started bad-mouthing me on TV when I wouldn't do it. Look, Chris Cuomo is a hack journalist. He's a game show host, all right? And they're playing this thing there. It's frickin' frack is what it is. And something that's this serious, for them to be so lighthearted about it. Both he has Chris on his daytime show, which is just an infomercial. That's all it is. And he's totally changed the narrative with the assistance of his brother. And, MSNBC, the same thing. You know, it's funny because Ari Melber used to do hit jobs on him, and he deserved it. He was, you know, this guy, you know, dumped on AOC and the progressive wing of the Democratic Party last year when he won re-election. And the Working Family Party, they reluctantly support the guy. But at the end of the day, he's a very conservative neoliberal. He's given, you know, it doesn't surprise me, the stuff about about prisons, because he hasn't given any clemencies. On the other hand, Trump has given more clemencies in his 3 years than Cuomo has in 10 years in office. More of this last year than Cuomo has given out. And we'll talk about that because I have a real bone to pick with him, because it was because of prisoners that he's where he is right now. And this goes back to 2003 when he rode the back of the Rockefeller drug law movement. He parachuted in, just like he is right now. He's parachuted in. He's hogging the time. He has these daily, and he's there with a tote board, basically a tote board. And we have 10,000 deaths to 8,000, but he, what else is he doing? I mean, he's not stopping. He could do something concrete, as you just mentioned, which
he's launching Instagram campaigns.
I know. It's disgusting. In the meantime, we have had more deaths than any of the rest of the states combined right here. And this is supposedly a guy who's doing a great job when there are more deaths in this state than any place in the country. And
not only someone who's praised now for doing a good job, but a recent poll found Democrats would actually like him to take on Trump in November instead of Joe Biden. As I mentioned in the intro, I wouldn't put it past the Democratic Party elite to somehow find a way to draft him. But Randy, that's all the more reason to look back at his record as governor and how he got involved in politics to begin with. Tell us how you first encountered Andrew Cuomo.
Okay, in 2002, this is my 5th year working with the William Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice. We had a movement called the Mothers of the New York Disappeared. This is all against the Rockefeller drug laws. It was families. It was patterned after the Madres de Plaza de Mayo in Argentina. So we got all of these women and children of those who were doing excessive time in prison, 15, 20, 25 years for minor drug offenses. And it became, by 2002, a campaign issue. And Cuomo was running for governor, and he met with us, but then he dropped out of the race. The following year, it really started to hit its peak in 2003. And so Cuomo contacted me through his friend and my friend, Joe Prococo, his closest friend, who's in jail right now for corruption up in Otisville. Ironically, he's, only the president can give him a pardon. Cuomo can't, but he's there. It's like the third or fourth Cuomo son. That's Mario Cuomo called him his third or fourth son, this guy, Joe Prococo. So Prococo gets a hold of me, and we have this meeting. He brings in Russell Simmons. Here, he takes my group called the Mothers of the New York Disappeared, and he says, let's form a new triumvirate. It would be Russell Simmons and hip hop, Andrew Cuomo alone, and then Mothers of the New York Disappeared. So we got in. There's a documentary on it called Lockdown USA. And he didn't go to the premiere. It was totally packed. You know why? Because he wasn't in it that much. He's got to be the center of attention. And that's how he was throughout the next year with this campaign. He had to be the center of attention. He had to get the key spots. If you take a look at the big rally that we had at, it was over here at City Hall. And it was 50,000 people showed up. And it was me, him, and Russell Simmons that kind of emceed it. He never left the stage. He had to make sure his face was on the stage at all times. And he tried to control the press conferences. I got into a lot of fights with him and Joe Prococo because he wanted to be the main guy, just like he is right now. He was trying to.
But did you get the sense he cared about the issue?
No, because I'll tell you, you'll know more about that later. He cared about the issue in the sense that he knew it was a very, if you take a look back at all of the press that we were getting in 2003, conservatives, everybody supported change. I was dealing with Pataki at that time, the governor, for changes. I was dealing directly with him up in Albany in his office for changes, and he wanted a piece of it. So he parachuted in, then he was trying to take over the wheel of the issue. And he turned off a lot of people. We had the big rally. And after that, Cuomo really got weird, man. The following year, the mothers of the New York disappeared. I mean, the mothers of Plaza Mile, 4 of them came up to New York City. Back in January 2004, I went down to Argentina. Then a few months later, they came up to lot 4 women in their 70s and 80s came up to lobby for changes in the Rockefeller drug laws. And we met with the district attorney of Manhattan by the name of Morgenthau, like 80 years old himself. And Cuomo was not invited. This was put together by a state senator by the name of Eric Schneiderman at the time. Cuomo went nuts that he wasn't invited. I said, this ain't about you, Andrew. And so what he did, he got Russell Simmons to go to City Hall as we are having this like historic meeting with 4 women and a couple of ex-prisoners and the DA to get him to come out against the drug laws. And guess what? Cuomo has a press conference to say that when the Republican convention comes 3 months later, if there's no changes, they're going to have a demonstration. All right. And so the reporters went to that for a second. They couldn't figure out why he would have that simultaneously with ours. So they came over to ours and said, man, that was crazy. That was much ado about nothing. But he was trying to undermine us and grab the spotlight. And so that was just one of the things that he did. Now they're working on a deal. We got dealt out of it, Andrew and me, by the governor, and they brought in Russell Simmons and somebody else to deal with them. And Cuomo's going crazy throughout this night that it's the last day of the legislative session. And he's going crazy, and he's calling me up. Finally, he calls me up. I've got some good news. There's no deal. So he was happy there was no deal. I got some good news. There's no deal. And so I mean, he was thrilled that there was no deal. It was like, I didn't want the deal that they had, but the fact is that was it. They were going home, no deal, and he was ecstatic. And it wasn't going to come up for another 6. This actually happened before the Madres de Plaza de Mayo came up. So now getting to 2004, this thing happens with Morgenthau and everything. And now the guy is getting a little nervous because, he needs the attention. There is the repeal of the death penalty in the state of New York happening. And there was a committee hearing in, I think it was Rockland County. And I was invited. I went with Barry Scheck was there. He had all these people, experts on the death penalty, that were having this opening day. Andrew Cuomo got this guy Kaczynski, whose brother, I forgot his name, but the Kaczynski guy called me up, someone from the ACLU, to have a press conference to happen before this thing even started, to try to latch onto the attention this event was garnering because it was kind of an interesting day of discussion on the death penalty. Andrew wasn't invited to speak. So what did he do? He just went up there and had his own press conference, had nothing to do with the people inside. And but it was pretty much the type of person he is. He needs the spotlight at all times. He will exploit it. I just gave you 2 instances, and that's what he's doing right now.
Absolutely.
He's relishing it. Inside, he's hooked to this. But I don't think at the end of the day he's going to accept the nomination if it's given to him, because he's got too many skeletons in the closet, man. All of those guys he was associated with, 3 of them went to jail in this Sunni scam. His closest friend back, for 25, 30 years.
What exactly was that? This is regarding the city university system in New York.
Yeah. It was some kind of project that would bring in investment, and there was a bunch of state money that was involved in it. And 3 or 4 guys upstate were involved with this guy Joe Prococo, getting the contracts, and he kept saying, "I want my ZDs." He's caught on tape saying that. They really investigated Cuomo. This is Preet Bharara, and he was basically a unindicted co-conspirator. There's no way, he's such a control freak. There's no way he did not know what Joe Prococo was doing. That will be reopened once, I mean, I know I got these people on Facebook, all of these liberals like Joy Behar are like going crazy where I post anything negative about Andrew Cuomo. They're so desperate that they, think that Joe can win. So all of these people say, "Shut up, Credico." And I said, wait a second. He's going to be as bad as Trump because he is a control freak. He's not a progressive at all. When the Rockefeller drug law thing came, there were changes finally, and not to my satisfaction. I was invited to speak at the governor's office. I didn't go. Others went. So Cuomo's now running. He's got a lot of prestige out of this thing. He got so much popularity out of it that he's now running for attorney general. And I'm not supporting him, and he's going crazy over that.
This is 2007, 2008?
2006.
2006.
He's running for attorney general.
And there's a common theme here, which is him wanting to be the center of attention. You're talking about him now taking over as attorney general,
yes,
right in the lead up to the financial collapse of 2008, when there was a lot of talk about prosecuting bankers on Wall Street. He was actually the attorney general. Randy, did he do anything to hold anyone accountable?
No, he did not. He did not to go after. Those guys are his friends. If you take a look at his campaign contributors, 2006 and 2010, when they moved out, it was like a coup de grace on David Patterson, the first black governor in New York history, who was, his like very bad vision, but a very smart guy. So Eliot Spitzer got bounced out, and they all got
partially because, well, we know the official reason Spitzer was ousted was over this high-end call girl scandal, but he was actually someone who was more willing to stand up to Wall Street than people like Cuomo, correct?
Yes, he actually did go out after AIG and a whole bunch of others. He was called the Sheriff of Wall Street. In this 2006, he ran for governor, and 2006, he's running for governor. Been attorney general for 8 years, and now he's running for governor. And they hate each other. I mean, these two, they were at an event that I put on the Upper West Side with these mothers from Argentina, and they all wanted the microphone. Andrew Cuomo comes in there, and I got a picture of him and Spitzer looking at each other. Man, did they hate one another. So really, they really hated one another. And Cuomo was jealous. And, look.
What did he do?
What did he do? He just,
once taking over as AG on the issue of Wall Street or any of those other prison issues you had him working on.
Okay, that 2006, he's running, and I'm not supporting him. I'm out there bad-mouthing him. So he calls me up one night and started screaming at me, saying that I am going to close down the fucking Kunstler Fund when I get in as AG. He actually threatened to close, like he was going to investigate me.
This is one of the most historic law funds in U.S. history, named for Bill Kunstler, a famed lawyer who defended a number of high-profile individuals, the Black Panthers, for example, a real resistance.
Stokely Carmichael, you could get the list. Martin Luther King was his lawyer, and Chicago 7, H. Rap Brown, so many people that Kunstler.
A legend.
Yes,
a true legend.
He's the greatest civil rights leader. And by the way, if you get a chance, watch the film on him by his daughter. It's called Disturbing the Universe. You want to see a giant, just watch that documentary, Disturbing the Universe, by Emily. And he was the guy at Attica, all right? He was the lawyer up at Attica that was negotiating with Governor Rockefeller and everybody on behalf of the prisoners when they stormed in and killed 30 or 40 people and threw everybody else on the ground on glass and all of that. But
so Cuomo threatens to shut down the fund named after this legend of the resistance.
I was the director of the fund, all right? And it was the one that was the umbrella group for the mothers in New York District. He knew it. And, he came into that fold with us when he parachuted in 2003. And now he's like, if I didn't stop harassing him on a radio show I was doing, he was going to make sure. And he was like drunk late in the night. And I was there with Anthony Papa, who was working with me, a former prisoner under the Rockefeller drug laws. He was a chief organizer, and we co-founded this group called Mothers in New York Disappeared for the Concert Fund. But he was right there. He couldn't believe it. I had the phone. I should have taped it, but I had the phone on speaker, and he just ranted, man. It was like one of those things that you see. What's his name from A Few Good Men, Nicholson, you can't, I'm gonna, or Bogart from Kane Mutiny. The guy was completely like lost it. And in fact, one of the candidates against him, Mark Green, at the time, said, boy, if you had taped that and given it to me, he would have been out of the race. I should have taped it. But he always thought that I did, though. I never said that I didn't. But I didn't tape it, but he thought that I did. And so now he becomes Attorney General, and nothing on drug law reform at all. He didn't give a damn. He moved on, and then he was, like you said, in 2008, 2009, didn't prosecute anybody on Wall Street. In fact, in 2010, remember, I got arrested up in Albany because he closed down the park across the street from the state capitol, but the district attorney wouldn't prosecute. Andrew Cuomo, up back then, he actually had the state police arrest people that went into, I think it's Academy Park, right across. And there were people camped out there. He threw them out way before Bloomberg did in this city, in New York City, which was like a month later. But he actually threw people out and had us arrested. But the prosecutor in David Soares Woodna, who I know, and he was a drug law reformer himself, that's how he got elected, he would not prosecute us. But the fact that he did that, the fact that Cuomo closed down, and back then, you look at that woman, what's her name? Wolf. What's her first name? Naomi Wolf. I think she got arrested protesting Cuomo at some rich person's event. Because, look, in 2006, if I say look again, I sound like John Kasich says look all the time. Yeah, he says look.
Or Obama. Look.
Look. Yeah, that's John Kasich. You ask him a question, now look. Instead of Reagan used to say, well, anyway, the biggest funder for him in 2006, I forgot to mention this, because I went to the fundraising event, I was invited to it, was Alphonse D'Amato. He was his biggest bundler of campaign funds in 2006, and he reaped the benefits over the next 10 years with, I think it's Park Avenue Strategies or something like that.
Explain who that is for viewers who may not know.
ACF is a right-wing corrupt guy that almost went to jail, a right-wing Republican senator from New York for many years. He lucked in 1980 in the election. It was three ways. The Democrats should have won, but it's a long story. Anyway, he is a reactionary, supported the culture war, was owned by the banks, totally owned by the banks. Alphonse D'Amato, a horrible human being. And so, but he raised all this money for Cuomo in 2000. I couldn't believe it, man. In 2006, so I was at this event, and that's when he met this woman, the cook. What's her name? Sandra Lee. Is that her name?
Sandra Lee, semi-homemade. I'm guilty of having watched her show in the past.
Well, it's okay, but I think they're no longer together. Look, the guy he's kind of, I always call him Governor Gigolo, because he married a Kennedy and had children with them, and the children seem to be great people. And Carrie Kennedy is a progressive, but she was really not treated great by Andrew Cuomo. And now he marries us, and then they're gone. He lived in a white community up there in Westchester in her mansion, and D'Amato. I mean, what's that going to say? So now he never goes after them. When Wall Street and bankers, nothing. In fact, just the opposite, man. He gave them all tax breaks. MSG, Madison Square Garden, pays no tax. Real estate money gives them money. Ken Langone is one of his big contributors. David Koch is one of his big contributors. You can take a look at all of them. Lloyd Blankfein. Those are the people that gave him money. All right. So he didn't do anything. No prison reform. After that, never changed the marijuana laws after that. Still, we don't have medical marijuana you can buy and smoke. They've made it into some kind of capsule. And you can still get arrested for smoking a joint in New York State. And he's calling this is the most progressive state in the country. Oh yeah, well, there's like 30 states that have legalized marijuana. He doesn't, and they wouldn't change. There wouldn't be anything for stop and frisk. Wouldn't speak out against stop and frisk. Never spoke out when a black individual was shot by the police. Not once did he do that as governor.
What about Eric Gardner, who was strangled to death by the NYPD? There was a huge Black Lives Matter movement in New York. How did Cuomo handle that?
The same way he handled didn't care, man, more than he cared about the people at Zuccotti Park. He just doesn't care about those people. He cares about rich people. He's done everything for the wealthy. And you know, every couple of years you have the working families party say, we're not gonna support you. But somehow they pull a deal with him. He promises something, and then he always reneges. You know what I mean? Seriously, how he got union backing. Unions should have supported Cynthia Nixon the last time. Should have supported Zephyr Teachout or me in 2000.
I actually forgot that Miranda from Sex and the City ran for governor. Thanks for reminding me.
Yes, well, she ran, and she got 34% of the vote. And he said, well, you see that? But he had tons of money, man. You take a look at who contributes to his campaign. So he hasn't done anything. No clemencies. I met with him in his office in 2011. He showed me around. He says, well, this is where Teddy Roosevelt used to stand, right by that window. And this used to belong to Governor Seward in 1846 or whatever. And then he had a big thing of cigars. I'm a cigar smoker. He had a big humidor of cigars. Bill Clinton gave me all these cigars, like all these Cubans. You think he'd give me even one? You know, look, I went out with him twice to have a drink. I had to pay both times. He's tighter than, what are they, Dick's Hat Band. All right, that's him. Tighter than Dick's Hat Band. He's very cheap. And everyone says it. You go out with him, forget about it. He's got one arm longer than the other. So this is a guy who is cold-hearted, didn't give out any clemencies. He promised me in that meeting when he showed me the cigars that he was going to give out clemencies. He promised me, but he never did. Didn't give out any the first couple of years. You know, everybody, all the Republicans, they all give out clemencies. His father was tight with it too. His father built 37 prisons. All right, everyone talks about his father, that great speech he gave in the '84 convention. Let me tell you something. His father built 37 prisons and sprinkled them upstate. All right, he was against the death penalty, but you know they used those prisons to house. They were warehouses, and they're full. I mean, you still got 50-something thousand prisoners in the state of New York. There was only like 12,000 when Attica went down. You know, now you have, it went up to 70, and then the laws changed, the Rockefeller laws, and it came down to 55,000, something like that. But no clemencies. You got people there. You know, you got people. He's talking about the border here, the border and people in cages. There are Latinos from Dominican Republic and people from Puerto Rico and Hondurans that are in our jails in the state of New York, separated from their children. Go over there, right across from where he lived with his wife, Miss Lee. There are two state prisons for women there. There's Taconic and there's Bedford Hills Prison. 2,000 prisoners at any given time there. They're separated from their children, man. You think he'd put them back together? This is a horrible thing. His position, how he got into that position, was exploiting the Rockefeller drug laws. Everybody knows. You can ask any reporter how he parachuted in, how it raised his profile, and he parlayed it, and then he became like a Southern governors, Dixiecrats gave out pardons. You know what I mean? Lester Maddox and George Wallace used to give out pardons. This guy doesn't give out any. He doesn't. He says, I don't do it that way. Usually at Christmas time, you give out a couple of pardons, not him. So, and if he does it, it's somebody that's already served his time and is in a grave, all right? It's like a pardon for somebody in 1971. He pardons, clears the record, but he doesn't let anybody out. And right now you can see that that sentiment has not left him in the way that he's dealt with this crisis. He's thrown them overboard, people in prison, the same way the captain of a slave ship in the Middle Passage, when there wasn't enough water, fresh water on board, would just throw the slaves, or if there was a British trawler coming by to bust them, they would throw all the slaves, into the ocean. so they wouldn't get arrested. That's him, man. He's just right now has chucked him. He doesn't care, but it's going to come back to bite him. Hopefully it doesn't. But like you said, Eric Garner, Sean Bell, you could go on forever with these people who've died by the NYPD in the 10 years that he's been governor. Never spoke out once. Never spoke out against stop and frisk one time. He could have passed something with that legislature. He had him by the, you know what, New Jersey and North Carolina, they have, what do you call it? No racial profiling laws, anti-racial profiling laws there, right? We don't have one in this state. You would think by now we would have a law banning racial profiling, but we don't. Because that's him. What he's done is that he collects DNA. He did this with the DAs on anybody that goes into the system. Now they get their DNA. If you go in there for smoking a joint, you go in there for fare beating, all of these minor infractions, you go into jail even for a week, and they take your DNA. That's something that's very scary.
You mentioned his father, Mario Cuomo, who was a 3-term governor in New York. I think it should be emphasized that the Cuomos really are a political dynasty in the United States. They represent the machine, the political machine that comes out of New York, which is one of the most powerful in the country, thanks to Wall Street and all of the wealthy forces that come out of the state. How would you succinctly describe the Cuomo legacy?
Cuomo legacy, if you look at it, looks good on the surface, right? Looks good on the surface because he's got some of his father's charm and charisma. But if you look at his speeches, they're forced out. There's no real passion behind it. He can feign passion, but anyone that is a student of speeches and likes great speeches know that these are contrived, and the emotion is contrived. His father was the same way. His father was a Wall Street guy. His father was liberal on one thing. He was against the death penalty. But anything outside of that, look, he supported Giuliani in 1993. He pulled some things on Rudy Giuliani, on David Dinkins to get rid of the first black mayor. He's the one that did it, and the son was his chief of staff. All right, remember that. His son was his chief of staff when all of these things were happening. What he did to David Dinkins, he released a report on Crown Heights like a week and a half before the election to diminish the Democratic vote for David Dinkins, and Rudy Giuliani squeezed in. And Giuliani returned to favor the following year by endorsing him over George Pataki. So that was the quid pro quo on that. But look, we're talking about, there you go with that look. We're talking about a Queens politicians coming out of the Queens machine. All of his guys that he brings in. Look at the state Supreme Court, the new Chief Justice, a white Italian woman from Westchester. All right, that's who he brings up. The heir to Jeannie Pirro. All right, these are the type. The parole board, or like it was run by reactionaries out of Queens. If you take a look at it, it's whites only. You go to the Cuomo administrations like the Rockies. The higher you get, the wider it gets. That is the Cuomo administration. So for him to come out disingenuously talking about how this is affecting the Black community and the Latino community, the coronavirus, why are they dying in such higher numbers? Well, he's part of that, man. He's done nothing to help out people of color in this city. Hey, look what he's done with the prisons. They're the ones that go to jail, people of color. There's your percentage. 97% of those going in on drug charges are Black and Latino. Why doesn't he do a study on that? You know?
It's a good question.
So, but nobody asked him this. Somebody asked him a question the other day. Does he feel bad about being late on this thing, that you delayed it? And he went, you could see inside he had to maintain his control, but inside he was going nuts because he is enjoying this and didn't want anybody to rain on his party. Remember, there was a bombing here in New York City a couple of years ago in a couple of trash bins in New York City, and the FBI took over. It was a federal case, and the mayor was there, and the police commissioner, and Cuomo wasn't invited. So what did he do? He had a couple of his own press conferences that nobody went to, but he had to get a piece of that action. But the feds didn't want him there.
Those were the rice cooker bombs, right, which were scattered about the city.
That was the FBI thing. It wasn't the state of New York. It was the FBI. A guy was from Jersey, so it was from Jersey to here, and he had these press conferences that he wasn't invited to. He and De Blasio do not like each other. He resents anybody. He doesn't like anyone getting any attention, which is the same way Giuliani is, and the same way Trump is. So he and Trump are both Queens politicians. All right, both of them. And you're going to get someone who is just as megalomaniacal and just as big of a control freak, Andrew Cuomo. He'll do anything for attention. Look, he went to Israel.
I was going to get into that. In 2014, you were running against Governor Cuomo for governor, and that was right in the midst of one of Israel's most brutal assaults on the Gaza Strip, the 51-day war.
Right. On the hospitals. They were killing all of these children and civilians in hospitals. All right?
So you challenged him on this.
Yes, I did. I challenged him on a lot of things. But I remember Ralph Nader. I saw him a week after this, and he came up and he thanked me for doing it. But, I'm on Democracy Now!, and I bring it up. I said, look, there you go. I'm doing John Kasich. He said, here he goes to Israel, and he meets with Netanyahu, and he goes to these caves that they supposedly are coming in out of and causing, but he doesn't go to the graves. I said that. He goes to the caves, but he doesn't visit the graves in Gaza. And the other candidate there wouldn't take a position. I said, wait a second. New York is an international. There's a lot of money. We do get involved in foreign policy. But that was his third time there. The prior time to that, he was there on a shooting range. Cuomo, just before that, like a year earlier,
Did he go to that weird theme park that Jerry Seinfeld went to, where you can pretend to be part of the Israeli army or something?
Yeah, well, look, that's him. He actually went over there and went on a firing range where they learn to shoot Palestinians. All right, that's what they do there. Who are they? They're not at war with anybody except for a war against in the occupied territories. That's who they're fighting. And he went to one of these firing ranges there, just with Netanyahu, and then he does it again in 2004. So his position is the same as Trump's position on Israel. He's just as reactionary. He does get AIPAC money. That's what it's all about for him. He got a photo op, went over there, supported them. Somebody said, you better go over there while this thing, and he didn't visit the Palestinians, and I made a big deal of it. Look, it's the third rail of politics in New York City. You cannot support the Palestinians. Most of these politicians believe, except for a few in East New York. You have Charles Barron that does. In fact, he invited Robert Mugabe here into New York in front of the city council. So he was kind of, he was a radical. But you can't look at de Blasio. His real name is William Wilhelm. All right. His father's German. Father's German American. You can't run with a German last name in New York City. So he changed it to Blasio. He's just as much of an opportunistic individual as Cuomo is. And he hasn't been good with the prisons. Rikers, he has control there. The city jails, he has control of. He's arresting people. It's called broken windows. He brought in Bill Bratton, and they brought back broken windows, just another name for stop and frisk. And the vast majority are poor people who can't afford to get on the subway system that sucks to begin with because it's hot, it's slow, and it's crowded. So they have cops doing that all the time. And they finally came up with this thing called no cash bail. No cash bail, which means you no longer have to put up cash if you get arrested for one of these minor infractions, jaywalking if they want to get you for that, or smoking a joint if they want to get you for that, or fare beating. They let you go. You don't have to post $50. You don't have it. You end up at Rikers. And so guess what? Cuomo has got the state legislature he signed this last year. He's got them by the cojones, and now they have just passed the repeal of that. So these people are going to start getting arrested again, thrown back into the prisons who can't afford a $50 or $75 and continue to jam the prisons during this coronavirus plague. in New York City. And this is the center of it, man. And look, he's getting a lot of good press from it. When they start examining his record, they start doing an autopsy on this plague in this city, and they say, wait a second, where was he then? And then let's look at his past. I want these progressive Democrats, if such a thing is possible, to take a look at his past. It's right there. Take a look at all the things that he's done. He would not allow marijuana to be legalized. People could use marijuana right now that are sick.
But Randy, look at the Clintons, look at Joe Biden. Hubris is a powerful blinder, especially when you have the machine of the Democratic Party behind you.
Yes.
I wouldn't discount Cuomo's desire to work in Washington, trade in his seat in Albany for a seat in the White House sometime soon. But Randy, what do you say to people who, because I know you're no fan of the president, I think you would like to see someone else take over next year. So what are you going to say to people who have this deep reactionary hate for President Trump and say anything is better than that? And not only is anything better than that, you shouldn't criticize his main political opponents, even if that person is Joe Biden or Andrew Cuomo.
Joe Biden, what is happening here? I suppose if I lived in Germany in 1932, my politics, I'd hate Hindenburg, who was 84 years old, but they convinced him to run against the other guy, the colonel, the little colonel, a corporal, Hitler. And so they convinced him to run. Now, the guy was a right winger. He was old school. And a lot of people held their noses and voted for Hindenburg rather than let Hitler win. So I'm not saying that Trump is Hitler, but I'll tell you one thing. What do you do with the Supreme Court when Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies? I mean, it's going to get worse and worse. And that is what extorts us progressives to hold our noses. And that wearing these masks, I guess, is good training to hold our noses and vote for whomever the Democrat is. Not that it's going to matter in New York. Trump is not going to win in New York. And what do I say to people? Anything to get rid of Trump. It's going to be a weird year, man.
Even if that's Andrew Cuomo?
I hope it's not Andrew Cuomo. And I really haven't given it much thought that you're going to have one megalomaniacal control freak who's going to have a real bad foreign policy replace a megalomaniacal creep control freak who has a bad foreign policy with Iran, Venezuela. He has no idea. He has no international knowledge except for Israel. That's it. He knows about that. And that's about it. He doesn't have any foreign. Things aren't going to change. And I said it today. So I guess we have to vote against Trump and then deal with the Democrats later. But who wants, after 4 years of Trump, I got to settle for Joe Biden? After going through that, I got to settle for Joe Biden for the next 4 years? Well, remember, Joe Biden endorsed Andrew Cuomo when he was in that battle with Cynthia Nixon. And it looked like it was going to be a close race. So Biden came to the rescue. Andrew's not going to undermine him. But he did that to David Patterson. Patterson, with the help of the New York Post, was brought down, and the Post supported Andrew Cuomo. And Cuomo participated in the conspiracy to get rid of David Patterson, who was a very close friend of his. And he got rid of him, and then he became, it could happen here. This guy, the ambition never stopped.
I think it would have to come from the higher ups in the party, and that they would get Joe Biden on board with the plan if they weren't going to actually honor the fact that he's won, for all intents and purposes, the nomination at this point. But Randy, regardless of whether or not Andrew Cuomo is someone with political ambitions on the national stage this year, he's certainly someone we're going to have to deal with in the future, which is why I think it's so important that we had this conversation. And you just know everything. You know so much about New York politics, but also history. You read a lot of history books, and you're very involved in the political scene in New York. So you were the perfect person to really illuminate Andrew Cuomo's record.
Well, I could tell you a lot more, but that I have to be on a different network, I suppose. There's a lot more on the guy that I'm not going to talk about. I'll tell you about it sometime over the phone. But
all right, let's save it for when he's officially someone we have to deal with on the national stage. Randy Credico, comedian, host also of a podcast. Where can people catch your work?
It's Assange Countdown to Freedom, to spell it out.com. This is our 4th season. You were on it, Max. Your husband was on it, and so was Aaron Mate, and so was Ben Norton. So I've got all 4 of you.
The whole Grayzone family. Well, we love you, Randy.
And you can get it at AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com. You can get all of the past podcasts there, right there. Assange Countdown to Freedom, and it comes out once or twice a week. That's where I am right now. I'm getting more work done, not going to the studio. It's unbelievable. I'm doing more shows than I was getting done when there wasn't a problem. But the studio closed down because it was a non-essential service. Thank you very much, Anya.
Well, you are doing an essential service, Randy Credico. Thanks so much. Say hi to Bianca.
All right. See you later. Bye-bye.